Welcome, everyone. We are pleased to bring you another free 90-minute panel discussion today from Desert Waters Correctional Outreach entitled My Brother's Keeper, Enhancing Public Safety with Formal Peer Support. My name is Steve Howarder. I'm the moderator of today's discussion. I'm also a Desert Waters Master Instructor. I retired from the Illinois Department of Corrections after 31 years of service as a correctional officer, sergeant, and counselor. From 2018 till late 2020, when I retired, I served as the Northern Region Coordinator of Illinois DOC Staff Wellness Response Team. And I currently serve on the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police Wellness Team. Peer support is near and dear to my heart. Desert Waters is a nonprofit established in Colorado 22 years ago. Our mission is to improve the well-being of corrections and other public safety professionals through training, consulting, and other essential resources to foster resilience, mental health, and overall wellness in these challenging professions. Please visit us at desertwaters.com and follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook. And now let's introduce today's panelists. Stephanie Rawlings, Desert Waters Deputy Director, was scheduled to be on the panel today, but will not be able to do so. Today's panelists are Jack Digliani and Katerina Spinaris. We are greatly honored to have Dr. Digliani join us today, as he has worked in the area of peer support for 40 years, pioneering and contributing significantly to it, especially in the areas of privileged communication in Colorado. Jack Digliani, PhD, EDD, is a licensed psychologist and a former Fort Collins, Colorado police officer. He served as the Fort Collins Police Services Director of Human Services and police psychologist for the last 11 years of his Fort Collins police career. While in this position, he provided psychological services to employees and their family and clinically supervised the peer support team. He also served as the police psychologist for the Loveland, Colorado Police Department and the Larimer County, Colorado Sheriff's Office, where he provided psychological counseling services to department employees and their family and clinically supervised their peer support teams. He continues to serve the Larimer County Sheriff's Office as adjunct psychologist and as a guest lecturer in forensic and police psychology at Colorado State University. He is the author of numerous publications, including Reflections of a Police Psychologist and the Law Enforcement Peer Support Team Manual. Katerina Spinaris, PhD, is a research psychologist, a licensed professional counselor, and Desert Waters founding director. Katerina conducts research and develops wellness curriculum for corrections and other public safety staff. Katerina has authored 7 such courses to date, including Desert Waters' signature course, From Corrections Fatigue to Fulfillment, and a 40-hour peer support training. She has also conducted groundbreaking research in the area of post-traumatic stress and other mental health issues in the corrections workforce, and has helped design Desert Waters' staff wellness accreditation program, Safety Net Accreditation. Katerina is the 2014 recipient of the Colorado Criminal Justice Association's Harry Tinsley Award and is the author of numerous publications, including Staying Well, Strategies for Corrections Staff. Before we dive into this very important conversation, I'd like to invite you to post questions in the chat. At the end of our discussion, Jack and Katerina will answer as many as they can. After that, we'll stop the recording and invite you to unmute yourselves one at a time for open dialogue. You are welcome to leave if you need to, or stay for that extra time if you'd like. We will also be recording today's session, so if you must leave before the end, you can find it posted to our YouTube channel soon. So let's get into this. The first question on our list for Jack is, what do you mean by formal peer support in public safety professions?
Thank you, Steve, for that kind introduction. Formal peer support. Formal peer support differs from what I think is traditional peer support. So I've always characterized peer support as existing on 2 levels. Level 1 peer support is the peer support that we've offered each other for as long as there is recorded history. It can include advice giving. It can come from friends. It can come from family. It's people supporting people. I can imagine even long ago in the Roman legions, a new soldier facing combat for the first time, looking to experienced peers, for advice. What am I going to do? How bad is this? What am I likely to confront? This is peer support, and it's tradition, long term. It has existed for as long as there is recorded history. Formal peer support, in my mind, especially in police services, first responders, corrections, detention, this has to do with peer support teams that are created by policy. They have individuals that are specifically trained in peer support. So there's actual goals and guidelines for peer support team members. And often in states that have them, they function in compliance, not only with their agency policies, but state statute. And they're given some protection under state statute for confidentiality, which is one of the biggest differences between formal and informal peer support.
Thank you very much. Next question. It's a two-part. The first part, why offer peer support? And the follow-up is, what benefits can it provide?
I get this question a lot, Steve. It oftentimes comes from chiefs and sheriffs, top administrators of various departments. Why offer peer support? Because we have insurance programs that cover community counseling. We have employee assistance programs that the jurisdiction may contribute or pay for. So why do we need peer support? Well, peer support fills a niche that no other support mechanism can fill. And you say, well, Jack, what is that? That is the power that comes from talking to a peer, the power that comes from talking to someone that has had a background of experiences similar to your own. They don't have to be identical, but the power of the peer should not be minimized. Many people that will go to peers for support will maybe be a bit reluctant to go to sometimes what you hear derogatorily as a shrink or something like that. Sometimes shrink is used in a loving way as well. But so the power of the peer is the difference. And professional counseling cannot fill that niche. So especially if we're selective with our peer support people, to maybe when we talk about peer support teams, we can get more into that. But there are specific characteristics we look for in people that we will train as peer support team members. If they have these characteristics, they are often sought out by individuals seeking support when they won't seek support from any other source. And the
Thank you
second
very
part,
much.
Steve?
The second part was, what benefits can it provide?
What we have found in our experience, and our experience goes back over, nearly 40 years now with peer support teams, especially in Fort Collins, Colorado. We were one of the first in the state to develop a peer support team. The benefits are legion. Many of the people that eventually end up in maybe professional peer support or professional counseling gets generated through the peer support team. Many officers will contact peer support first, and then if additional work is needed, we'll move into professional counseling. We have reach out programs because we try to identify individuals that may be under significant stress. We reach out to them. We don't wait. We have an outreach program, a check-in program. We have annual check-ins. These basically have been, the primary benefits of peer support. We have also had, and unfortunately, these circumstances still exist. We have also had several of our peer support team members interrupt planned suicides. And that is one of the most significant, because even an embedded police psychologist, as I was, being a one-person office, you can't reach or stay in contact with the number of people, that an entire peer support team can. And they've been very functional in that area.
Yes, if I may jump in here, Jack, would you tell us a little more about your annual check-ins, and maybe you said monthly check-ins?
Our annual check-ins are basically designed for department-wide. In Fort Collins now, the police department has actually gone into semi-annual. So we get 2 check-ins and it's incentivized. If an officer will check in with the psychologist and they can do that once every 6 months, they receive literally 10 years comp time. So that's a shift because we work 10-hour shifts in Fort Collins. So that's a shift off solely for the fact you're checking in with the psychologist. The psychologist will then go through various, questions and contacts and how are you doing? I like to call it a check-in, not a checkup. We're not going to diagnose. We're not looking to develop you as a client in psychologist, counseling. We're basically just checking in to touch base. How are you doing? Things like this. When we first started this program, when I was still the psychologist for Fort Collins, many of the officers would come in and say, Jack, I'm giving you your check-in. How are you doing? And they would come in and visit, and starts very casually and friendly. Many times that's all it is. Other times it leads to significant counseling involving not only the officer, but family members. And so we have found that to work very well. The monthly check-ins are basically designed for our peer support team, where peer support team members, we meet once a month. There's additional training, there's mutual support, and there's also clinical supervision that occurs. So annual or semi-annual check-in for the whole department, monthly check-ins and training and clinical supervision for our peer support team members.
All right, thank you. Next question. For what types of issues can public safety agencies offer formal peer support?
Across the board, Steve, anything. We had a motto, and we still use this motto in Fort Collins. Now this extends to all employees, but at the time the motto came out to talk about police officers, and it was that police officers should never not have a place to go. If you're under stress, you don't know what to do, you don't know where to go, you come to peer support. And this is the message that we have perpetuated for decades now. So this is what we offer. This is what peer support exists for. We have posters. We have newsletters that we put up. We have shift briefing presentations, and these are the things that a peer support can offer. And Steve, did I answer that question directly?
Yeah, I think so.
So let me ask also, so you offer peer support not only for critical incident issues, but for general life issues?
Yes. Thank you, Katerina, for bringing up, because I felt there was a piece that I missed in there. At the end, our peer support, now, years ago, it used to be you were part of a critical incident management team where you might respond to critical incidents, correct? And there were also peer support teams. So in Fort Collins, we went through a few iterations of that, but we have always offered both services. Our people were trained and we trained ourselves. There was no program available because we started this program in 1986. So that's nearly 40 years ago. So our people were trained not only in critical incident response and how to support a person on scene, and then we developed a trauma intervention program, which is specified on the website if you're interested. But we also train them in peer support, helping a person manage the stresses of everyday life. It could be work-related or non-work related. So it might be a supervisor who you felt was singling you out, for punishment, or played favorites and kind of didn't, is not a pleasant person to work for, all the way to, marital problems and childhood problems. And our peer support people are very well trained in what to do if the information or the circumstances that come to them are beyond their level of training in peer support. So this I've always referred to as a ladder of escalation. And it's basically providing support for our supporters. Wouldn't it be awful to put people through a 40-hour training in peer support skills and then abandon them? It's like, okay, you've got enough. This is all you need. Well, not even psychologists do that. We have ongoing training. We have colleagues we can go to if, things are out of our specialty area and so on. So embedded in our program and inherent in the training is a ladder of escalation, knowledge about when things are beyond peer support, such as an officer talking too much about suicidality, the evaluations come in where there's a danger to self or others, there's a drug abuse or addiction problem. These things, although peer support can be part of it, we need additional, right? We need other interventions. And so ladder of escalation is important. And then referral, when to refer. And these we have found a very successful formula for our peer support teams here in Colorado.
Thank you very much. Next question. What might peer support services look like when offered to individuals or groups?
I think, Steve, basically the message we try to get out is that we are always available. We're 24/7. We have multiple people on our teams. One of my teams is about nearly 25, has members, 25 members strong. And that's because we find that some people are more prone to use certain members of the peer support team than others. And that varies. So you have to provide, I think, a wide, range of people on the peer support team. Now we have sworn, we have commissioned, non-commissioned civilians, we have dispatchers on our teams, we have some administrative personnel on our teams, we have some people of rank on our teams. And that was done in response to our sergeant saying, I don't have a professional peer on the team. So it's not often that you'll find, patrol officers seeking out sergeants unless their reputation is solid. But we do have various ranks, and there is, I think, a point at which you get so high in rank in an organization where it's hard to maintain that credibility on a peer support team because the responsibilities become so great. So you can sort of promote yourself off the peer support team. We had one of our members one time through the ranks, but got promoted to the equivalent of a deputy chief. Well, not many officers are going to go talk to a deputy chief about, work problems they might be having. So this is just something we have learned over the years. But this is what we offer.
Thank you. Next one, what types of issues regarding peer support should be covered by policy? And the examples listed are the mission, the team structure, team management and oversight, peer support or ethical conduct, confidentiality and its limits, and potential documentation. Pretty lengthy list.
Well, and pretty accurate list, Steve. That's sort of what we do in policy. Now, I've always advocated in our state law in Colorado, in order to be covered by our confidentiality statute, requires written guidelines. I wrote that in 2005 for this particular reason. We didn't want departments just saying, well, we have a peer support team, and then leave the people we train as peer support team people sort of out on their own. I mean, they needed some parameters so we could defend them if in fact, anyone ever challenged their confidentiality or their behavior. So within the written guidelines, we specify all that. I have 3 models of peer support teams that I've written about, and coordinator model, an advisor model, and a supervisor model. They all differ a little bit in the services, that they can provide. Very quickly, a coordinator model has no clinical oversight. And I've worked with teams or consulted with teams that are founded that way, but I do not recommend it because there's no ladder of escalation. There's no support for our supporters. The advisor model is sort of in between coordinator model and supervisor model. And that's where you hire somebody, you contract with a mental health professional, and they come in, they train. This is what I recommend if you're going to use the advisor model. They're available 24/7, but they're not on staff. They get paid per hour or some contractual agreement. They come in once a month. We still try to extend that training and clinical supervision, but they're not available for referral. They're not the department psychologist. So a peer support person couldn't refer to them as a matter of policy or as a matter of standing. Now, the supervisor model includes all that. So you have monthly training and so on, 24/7. You have the ladder of escalation, clinical supervision, but you're also de facto the department psychologist, and peer support team members can refer to them directly. And then, of course, that's no cost to the officer because this service is being provided through their employment. I've always, or most of my work has been done in the supervisor model. I've been embedded in these various departments that you mentioned earlier, but I have worked as an advisor to some departments over the years. You can make that work, but it's not the best practices model.
Okay, thank you.
May I jump in here? And how many
Yep.
questions? What do you do, Jack, when you are the psychologist embedded in the agency, and you have two people reaching out for peer support,
Mhm.
or additional, and they happen to have issues with each other, like they are in conflict with each other. So it would be hard, or would you be seeing both of them independently, individually, or would you refer one out, or would you refer both out when if there was that issue where they were at each other's throats?
Are you talking, Kettering, let me ask, like employees that cannot get?
Yes. So you have two officers, whatever, that their problem is conflict with their coworker,
I see.
and they both seek to see you, and you're in the organization, and you like, it will be kind of tricky. You don't want to be taking sides of one against the other. Like, how do you maintain neutrality? Have you even encountered that? Maybe you haven't. I was just wondering.
Yeah, I've always relied on the basic primary ethics for psychologists. We see this not only in coworkers, but the strategy might be the same, but we also see it in married couples, correct? So sometimes, and we'll make it husband and wife, but gender is not important. One partner would come in and want to talk about marital problems, but not yet ready for couples counseling. The other partner might request services as well. And as you know, that's not an ethically sustainable circumstance. Why? Well, because of the confidentiality involved. You can't provide confidential services to, say, a husband, and then have the wife come in and provide confidential services to that person, when much of what they're going to ask is, what did my husband say? What did my wife say? What did my partner say? What's their problem with me? So there, to try to answer your question directly, the psychologist, well, what I've done, it's usually the first person who calls for assistance. That person becomes my client, and then we refer the other out. And then we've also done joint counseling, myself and the outside psychologist, with both of them. Or when the couple's ready for couples counseling, we've been able then to bring the two in, because then confidentiality is not much of a concern because both parties are present.
Excellent. Very good. Clean boundaries. Absolutely. Yes. And I have one more question, actually refers to the prior item. How do your officers seek peer support? How do they go? Do they go through HR? Do they go directly to a peer supporter they want to talk to? How do they access peer support to begin with?
This is one of the benefits of having a well-developed peer support team: direct contact, confidential direct contact. Any officer can contact any of our peer support team members. And actually, that was true of the staff psychologist as well. Direct contact. You don't have to go through supervisors, no, external agencies get involved, and they can do that in person, via email, telephone, text, direct contact.
All right, thank you. Before I ask the next question, I just want to remind everybody that's watching or listening, if you have a question that you would like to have asked, please put it in the chat, and we will get to as many as we can at the end. Next question for you, Jack. What, in your estimation, is the biggest threat to the success of a peer support team?
Interesting question, Steve. And I've thought about this. Unfortunately, it turns out there are two primary threats and two general primary threats to a peer support team: external threats and internal threats. External threats to a peer support team, and we've seen this occur because I've worked with sheriff's offices, and sheriffs get voted in and out of office, correct? So there are sheriffs that are very supportive of the concept. They'll allow their deputies even to come to either engage in peer support while at work. They'll support peer support team members working off work hours and compensate them for them. And they're generally supportive not only of the peer support team, but of the psychologist that's embedded as well. Then that sheriff gets voted out or term limited, and we get a new sheriff in, perhaps. That person may not be as supportive. That's an external threat. So you don't see the funding for, overtime if our peer support team people are working. You don't see the support for on-scene support if we have to respond to a critical incident. Basically, over the years, now this is over 40 years, and we're not seeing it much now, but earlier on, we had several high-ranking administrators talk about you have to be tough enough to deal with this on your own. It's that old idea that, asking for assistance, especially in the psychological support area, is a weakness. And if you're that weak, maybe you shouldn't be in this job. That is one of the most significant external threats to a peer support team. Peer support teams exist basically at the will of the top administrator. Any administrator can come in, rewrite policy, eliminate the team. This happened in Denver, Colorado, many years ago. And I did an internship there. They had a psychological services unit. And it wasn't the top administrator that did that it was budget. When budget slimmed down, when the department didn't have enough money, one of the first things they cut were psychological services. And so they lost that position. They do a lot of work on contract, but never reinstated the psych services. So what about the internal threats? Well, the internal threats are caused by peer support team members themselves. What can you imagine would be one of the most significant undermining behaviors that a peer support team member could engage in? And that is violation of confidentiality. Somehow, intentionally, that would be the worst case, but even unintentional mistakes can undermine the credibility that a peer support team has worked for years. This is why we're somewhat selective about the people we put on peer support teams. So I'm looking for ICC in new peer support team members. That's interest, commitment, and credibility. If you have interest, commitment, and credibility, our training very likely will transform you into an exemplary peer support team person under our program. Very confident. We've done it for decades. That's the biggest internal threat. Peer support team members not functioning within their ethical boundaries, within the boundaries of policy, operational guidelines, and destroying the credibility of the team as a whole.
All right, thank you. Next one, how are privacy, confidentiality, and privileged communication different?
Steve, that's an interesting question. I mean, we could write a treatise on that, I think. Privacy, I'm thinking, is something maybe pretty common. Like you can have privacy on your back porch by planting trees and not seeing your neighbors. So it's either individual privacy, no one can see me, I'm out here reading a book or something, or a couple, you can have a private romantic getaway. I think it's kind of used in that sense, private. Now, peer support team interactions can be considered private, right? If they're away from a public observation point or something like this. Confidentiality or things that are confidential, can include privileged communication, but not necessarily. to me, it's almost like a moral agreement. So I'm going to talk to you, Steve, and I'm going to say, I'm going to keep our confidential, or I'm going to keep our conversation confidential. Meaning I'm not thinking that whatever you and I talk about, I'm going to go out and talk to, someone else about. So, but there's no legal force there, correct? I mean, it's just kind of an agreement. So we agree to keep our conversation confidential, but that won't stand up under the scrutiny of a court order or a subpoena, because it's just like an agreement between two people. We're just not going to gossip about this or tell anyone else. Okay, let's keep that. Privilege communication, on the other hand, has some legal force. So privilege communication is that without the consent of the person that that you've been interacting with, you are compelled by statute, by law, not to disclose that information. And that's how I look at those three concepts a bit differently. So privilege communication is the strongest. Like in Colorado, our statute says, who shall not testify without consent? That doesn't give the peer support team person any option. Without consent, that information is privileged. Even under subpoena, the peer support team person is protected from being compelled to testify, unless it meets certain exemptions, which are present for everyone. So that's the difference, I think, between those three.
May I
All
jump in
right.
there? Jackie, would you like to tell us about the latest statute you're working on right now, the legislature in Colorado regarding privilege communication? I think to be very informational for our audience.
Yes.
Here.
For people that are on peer support teams in Colorado, things are going to change. They're going to get better. I've introduced a bill into our legislature earlier this year with the help of one of our local representatives. Of course, they have to do the formal introduction. What we can do is draft the bill and then they introduce it. I'm happy to say that what it will do is extend the privilege of confidentiality to out-of-court peer support team conversations. Right now in Colorado, and we've had it since 2005, we have legal protection within the court system, but it did not extend in a statutory privilege outside of the court system. This bill, if made law, and I'm very confident it will be made and take effect in August, will extend that. So we'll have two statutes, much like psychologists have. We'll have two statutes that apply to peer support team members, and it will protect your conversations not only in the court system, but outside of the court system. This will bring us to best practices, peer support confidentiality. That's coming. So very confident. So our peer support team members in Colorado, you can look forward to that.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you, Jack. All right. Next one. Why are initial and ongoing training of peer supporters important?
Steve, again, very good question. I think for some of the areas that we talked about earlier, no one is trained to the degree of exemplary behavior in a 40-hour program. Psychologists certainly are not, which is why our programs exist for years. And then we have to do internships and work under supervision and so on. I think it's unfair to the people that we ask to take on this extra responsibility of providing peer support, to put them through a 40-hour program and say, that's it, you're done. If you come up with a question you can't answer or we didn't address in your training, where are you going to go with that? So this is why ongoing training. Now, again, in Colorado, even psychologists have continuing ed requirements, as do counselors and social workers and medical doctors, all have statutory required ongoing in-service training. And we provide that same support and benefit to our peer support team members. We do it monthly. It actually turns out, Steve, to be about 10 sessions a year, only because of vacations and so on. Some months we don't have a meeting for a particular reason. The most common reason is we'll have a retreat. So the meeting is kind of combined with the retreat, but the retreat is also for team building. And so we have a training component there and a supervisory component, but it's just members of the peer support team and their clinical supervisor just having some fun. The department gives us some funding. We have lunch, we visit, we go on a hike, we, enjoy ourselves. We get to know each other because we don't get to see each other often as a group because we're spread out, around all the shifts and divisions. And so this is how we've been working it, and with very good effect, I might say.
Thank you. Next one, why is oversight and supervision of peer support services important, including debriefing?
Yeah, debriefing is somewhat interesting, I think, and a bit different than what we do for clinical oversight every day. So when I talk about clinical supervision, for those of us in this group, I'm talking about supervision that you can do like once a month at our group meeting. And then even within that, we have to be careful about what can be done in a group setting and what has to be done individually, correct? Because when our peer support team people meet with others, they will often ask, is this something I can talk about inside, the peer support team group meeting? And the recipients of peer support will either say yes, or I'd like to keep this private. You see, I think it's very important. All these relate to each other. Because you're a peer support team member and a person comes to you for peer support, you do not waive your right to confidentiality. You do not waive your right to have that information kept even from other peer support team members, right? I mean, it's the only thing that you're waiving is, and our peer support team members make this known to the person by talking about limits of confidentiality. Because we provide clinical oversight, one of the limitations of confidentiality is I'm required by our policy and our guidelines to bring this under supervision. So the psychologist, may learn about them. None of the peer support team people that I know of over all the years we've done, over all the teams I've had, have ever said, well, then I don't want to talk to you about it. And why is that? That is because the psychologist must also gain credibility. It's not only the peer support team members. If you have peer support team members that have a lot of credibility, but the psychologist does not, who's going to go to that person if they know they have to take their information under clinical supervision? So why do we require it? Because we understand that the best possible peer support can come from the psychologist and the peer support person discussing what might be done, what's there, is there something that the peer support team member maybe was not aware of? Is this something we're required by law to report? It becomes a discussion like that. Many of the supervision elements in my experience have been like, I'm talking to this person, their dad's in the hospital, they're having a little bit of stress around it. I've talked to them about, some stress reduction, and I think things are going well. And my response to a peer support team member that would bring that to me is, that's great, keep it going. That's supervision. But we haven't left the peer support team person out to guess whether or not that's all that should be done. Other times I might have a recommendation. Well, have you thought about, speaking to this person, or how is this person doing? Maybe we need to do a reach out for that. And that is the benefit of, the clinical supervision. It's also important to know that I've never seen a statute, and Colorado certainly doesn't have one, that requires clinical supervision. What we require is that you function within your written guidelines. If your written guidelines require clinical supervision, then in order for peer support team people to be covered under the statute, you must engage in clinical supervision. That was written intentionally in 2005 so that departments could decide what kind of teams they wanted, and we didn't have the state impose on these police agencies how to manage or create your peer support team. It's worked out very well so far. So this is the reason why we mandate. It's always to support the supporters, provide a ladder of escalation, and most importantly, to deliver the highest quality of peer support that we can. That's the reason for clinical supervision.
All right. Thank you. Next question. What may be reasons for removing a peer supporter from the team?
Well, there's several I can think of offhand, Steve. Of course, written even in our guidelines, an intentional breach of confidentiality.
Yeah.
That is, oftentimes we can't recover from that. Now, notice I said intentional. Now, can peer support team members make mistakes and unintentionally, violate the confidentiality rule? Yes, it doesn't mean there may not be consequences, but we handle that on a case-by-case basis. What were the circumstances? One time I had a peer support team member come to me and say, Jack, I think I have to leave the team. Really? Why? Well, I slipped. I said this, and this was given to me in, a peer support team interaction. Well, that we were able to work through even with the person, that the information pertained to, and it was unintentional. This peer support team member had a wonderful history of peer support. People would, seek that person out all the time. And so we were able to work through it. But certainly that would be a case. Being convicted or being arrested, for some kind of violation would also be a reason for being put off the team. Now, we've always made it easy, and I've done this intentionally, and I believe it's an ethic we must keep ourselves in touch with. We've always made it easy for peer support team members to leave the team if they felt they lost one of the ICC. If you've lost your interest in the team, or you've lost commitment to the team, or somehow your credibility was damaged and that in some way, and you felt you needed to leave the team, we thank you for your service and we'll move you forward. We've never tried to cajole or to force people to stay on the team, because those people do not make the exemplary peer support team people we're looking for. So, any serious violation of crime, we have developed a code of ethics for peer support. It's on my website. It's kind of, I think, 21 elements right now. And they're just basic, what you have to do, keep confidential, keep up with the standards, and be careful if you're a supervisor. We didn't want to, when I wrote this, guys, honestly, I didn't want to exclude supervisors from providing peer support for immediate subordinates. And I'll tell you why, because some of our supervisors were so skilled, people sought them out no matter what position they had. That's the credibility these people had. So to prohibit that seemed a little bit overboard to me. But I ask if we have any supervisors here on a peer support team, why would you want to function and maybe jeopardize in a dual role position? Why would you want to function as a peer support team member for one of your direct subordinates when you can support them very well as a supervisor and refer them to another peer support team member? Therefore, you eliminate even any claim of, dual role conflict. So, because if you think about it, if you're a very good supervisor, or all of us, we probably have had supervisors that were our mentors, they were our confidant in some way. They just had that personality where you knew that they had your best interest in heart. They were looking to develop your skills. That is the supervisor you're going to go to. And they were never parts of a peer support team. Well, good supervisors still provide that. But if you're on the peer support team, why not just provide that as a supervisor and leave the peer support to another member that this person might seek out? So follow the code of ethics. It's designed to keep you from getting yourself into a conflict.
All right. Thank you.
Well, quick question here. Jack, have you encountered situations where people crossed boundaries so they became personally involved with a person that will give peer support to, like romantically or financially, or like in a way that was outside the bounds of ethics for your team?
Unfortunately, yes. And not able to go into detail, but that person, once the behavior became known, voluntarily departed the team. But it can happen, and we've had it happen. Doesn't happen often, but it has happened.
Right, because people get so close to each other, they get to know intimate details about the other party and their own needs, and the other person's needs can get all mixed up and to lose sight of why they're there to do peer support.
This is absolutely true, Katerina. And, psychologists, counselors, we face the same issues, right? Sigmund Freud talked about countertransference and these kinds of things. This is a boundary violation. It's an ethical violation. We have a state statute in Colorado that prohibits it, for licensed people and those that hold themselves out as, unlicensed therapists. But we have had that happen. And had that person not resigned from the team, they would have been removed.
Thank you.
Next question. Why is self-care of peer support team members important?
Steve, I guess the short answer to that would be anyone can be overwhelmed. Anyone can be the subject of vicarious traumatization, where you're dealing with the trauma of other people or even everyday stressors. Psychologists, counselors, we all have to develop these boundaries, and we have support mechanisms if we feel we're being overwhelmed. But you have to be careful. And this is the reason, again, why I'm such an advocate of monthly meetings. It's because peer support team members must support one another. Because where else do we go for support? People sometimes ask me, well, you're a psychologist, you sit and listen, to difficulties of others all day long. How do you manage that? Well, boundaries are something you can learn. I mean, you can get better at, but also I had the support of my own peer support teams. So at our monthly meetings, it wasn't only peer support team members supporting one another, they were also supporting the psychologist as the psychologist was trying to support them. It was just a wonderful way to support all of us who were dealing with more than what they would have had to deal with had they not been a member of the peer support team. Because you're asking a lot of people. Now, as a psychologist, I had one job. So in some ways, my job was easier, right? My job is focused on the health officer wellness benefit, wellness benefit that I was responsible for. This is my primary job. It's what I do, and I'm focused on it. Our peer support team members have other jobs that are primary. They're patrol officers, they're detectives, they're dispatchers, they're lab people, they're SWAT team members, and then they're firearms instructors, and then they have to do peer support in addition. When you ask people to do that, can you really do that in a good way without providing support for this extra responsibility that they are taking on, and not only taking on, but performing in a very good way? So mutual support is the key.
All right. Thank you. How can the agency facilitate and support peer support teams' self-care?
I think one of the biggest things is the check-in programs, allowing the development of peer support teams, recognizing that they're necessary. I think even memos from the chief, from your sheriff, from your head administrator. We had a circumstance, and I actually wrote about this in one of the books because it's such a difference from when we first started. So we had a person up in a small town north of Fort Collins try to jump onto a train that was coming through. Well, he fell off and the train ran him over and killed him. It's a sad circumstance. Peer support responded because, again, the officers had to deal with this circumstance, and we're always ready for on-scene support and then for follow-up support. We always send a peer support team person to our dispatcher, our dispatch center, make sure our dispatchers are doing okay. We send peer support team people to our records people who have to type up reports where someone says, his head was squashed. And, as people are typing, they get mental images of these things. Now, the day after, without my prompting, because back in the day, I would be prompting this all the time. Without my prompting, the sheriff wrote, if you're having any difficulty with this, please contact a psychologist or your peer support team. We're all in this together. This is something that we can talk about and manage if you're having any difficulties with it. It was the first time in my entire career that without my prompting, we got a statement from the head administrator saying, this is confidential. Seek it out, please. This is the kind of support that a well-developed peer support team gets from its administrators. If you've done it right, if you develop your team in the correct way, there is no us versus them in peer support and administration. Everybody's on the same page. So this is what I've been advocating for quite some time. We're not opposing anyone. There's no us versus them. And that was the epitome of it. That philosophy still exists in all the teams that we've instilled in our Northern Colorado police agencies. It's quite a difference from when we first started, where it took us 2 years to get our first policy in Fort Collins written because of opposition from the staff that peer support team interaction should remain confidential. There was no buy-in on the staff. We had to literally convince our upper administration that we needed this and this policy was not dangerous. Good peer support doesn't protect bad cops. If you have to rely on a peer support interaction to get information for an internal investigation on a bad cop, you must not have much of a case, because those kinds of things just have not occurred for us. And once we convince that, and I might mention the administrator that was very high in rank that opposed the development of a peer support team in 1986, after 1 year of operation, became one of its biggest advocates. Just loved the peer support team because of what it could do. And that's what a well-managed and well-administered and clinically supervised peer support team can do. So our nemesis became, one of our prime supporters. Quite satisfied.
I'll bet. All right. Thank you. So that concludes the list of questions that we have prepared. So thank you all for attending today's Desert Waters free panel discussion.